I think for me growing up, nothing was ever enough. I wasn't Latin enough to be accepted by the Latinas. I wasn't white enough. I'm not a redneck. My parents didn't have money. So, even though I went to a private school for a few years, I didn't really assimilate with them, but I wasn't in the hood. So I just really didn't know where I belonged. And I think that really fostered my desire to be inclusive.
From Fiore Communications, it's How I Got Here, a show of inspiring stories from Tallahassee area leaders, business owners, and neighbors, all the challenges, opportunities, inspirations, the twists and turns of life that led them to where they are today. Everyone has a story worth telling, and I am really grateful that we get to bring a few of them to you. I truly have been changed by my conversations with these amazing people, and I'm confident you will be too. I'm Dave Fiore, and in this episode, I talk with Kristine Dobosenski, whose positive attitude and affection for life and everyone around her belies the struggles and challenges she has endured. From addiction and damaging relationships to finding love and peace with herself, Kristine's story is sure to encourage anyone tempted to think it can never get better. I do need to give a warning here that this episode contains brief but frank discussion about drug use and its consequences. We started with a question about how she sees herself today.
I love to love people. My purpose in life is to leave everyone better than I found them. And that's just something that I've carried with me across whatever industry I've worked in, whether it was Sandals and Beaches, American Express, publishing, hairdressing, whatever it is, I just want to pour into people. So usually I hug someone the minute that I meet them. I warn them that I'm going to do it, and then they have about 3 seconds to tell me I'm not a hugger.
Is that usually enough time to defend themselves if they don't want to?
I can usually see a cold panic coming over them, and I'm like, would you rather just shake hands? But so I've been hugging people for about 4 or 5 years as opposed to shaking hands, and I can count on the number of hands on one hand, the number of people who were like, please don't hug me. But the number of people who said, I really needed that is far superior. So it's really quite worth making people uncomfortable. I'm an entrepreneur through and through. I didn't know I was going to be an entrepreneur when I grew up, but it's something that has just happened. So today I am a hairdresser and beauty blogger. I have a beauty blog called Tally Beauty Girl. Our mission is to build a community of women who want to be beautiful both inside and outside. And then, of course, I get to do their hair and makeup in the process.
So I know you grew up in Miami.
Yes.
Right? And so just tell me, I just want to get a feel for what life was like then. Your parents, any siblings?
Growing up in Miami?
Growing up in your home, your family in Miami.
Yeah. So my mom had my brother, I have a brother, at a really young age, and we have separate fathers. And then my mom remarried when I was a baby, our stepdad. And my dad is the greatest thing that has ever happened to anyone. And my brother is 3.5 years older than me. So growing up, my mom was really strict.
Strict how? What do you mean?
Yeah, there was no ifs, ands, or buts about what mom said. If mom said it, it could be wrong, but mom said it, so that's what's going to happen. We were, I was 10 when Hurricane Andrew hit South Florida. And because of, all of the fallout that happens after a massive hurricane, we just didn't have very much. We didn't have, our stove didn't work, and my parents didn't really have money. And so I was never allowed to really participate in extracurricular activities. Going on field trips was kind of not really an option. Most of my clothes were purchased at Kmart. And because of these things, and just the culture of Miami, so Miami is obviously predominantly Latin. I have Puerto Rican in me, but I wasn't really raised with the culture. So because of a plethora of things, I was very much left out. I was bullied. I was always an outsider. I was never included. I was not a popular person. I was a know-it-all and teacher's pet and just anything that would make everybody hate me.
So you're saying it's a combination of maybe a little cultural difference and a little bit of self-admitted personality?
I have a
there?
strong personality. Absolutely. Right. It's something that I have prayed would go away. I've always wanted to be like really demure and proper and whatnot until I realized that those people are boring and God made me the way I'm supposed to be. I've just had to learn how to channel it in more productive ways and, you know, respect other people's boundaries, set my own. But anyway, so growing up, I was definitely bullied and made fun of. In middle school was obviously the hardest for everyone. So
how were you bullied? How did you feel bullied?
The first thing that comes to mind is they cut off my hair. My hair was really, really long.
Somebody held you down and somebody else cut
I
your
didn't
hair?
even realize it. So our school was very overpopulated, and so to get through the halls, and I was tiny, like little girl, I would have to like hold on to my friend's backpack hook to like pull me through the masses. And I guess somewhere through that, someone had like cut one of my braids, and I got home and I was like, oh my gosh, my hair's gone.
I mean, was that a thing? Did people do that to
I don't
other
think
people?
so. I mean, I've never met anyone who that has happened to.
Wow.
But yeah, that happened. And then our school, the kids published a newspaper, like a not a fake newspaper, but it wasn't like, you know, produced by the school, basically making fun of kids. And I was on the front. Basically, you know, they were talking about how flat-chested I was and gave me the nickname The Wall. So for the rest of the year, as we would walk through the halls, like everybody would just kind of rub their hand on the wall when they would see me, kind of reminding me of that. You know, just different things like that. So when I got to high school, my high school offered cosmetology as an elective. We were a vocational high school. And, you know, that was kind of my opportunity to learn how to be a girl and deal with this crazy mop on my head. And, you know, it just really set the tone for the rest of my life.
So to me, it's a little interesting if you're not, and maybe they couldn't affect how you felt about yourself, but they were certainly giving you a hard time about your looks in some way, that would lead you to want to do cosmetology and beauty.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's really difficult for anyone, but I think especially as a woman, because society puts so much value on women's appearance. You know, I think that it's incredibly difficult when you look in the mirror and you don't like what you see. And, you know, your hair is 90% of your selfie, and it can really, you know, make or break your day. I think for me growing up, you know, nothing was ever enough. I wasn't Latin enough to be accepted by the Latinas. I wasn't white enough. I'm not a redneck. You know, my parents didn't have money. So, you know, even though I went to a private school for a few years, like I didn't really assimilate with them, but I wasn't like in the hood. So I just really didn't know where I belonged. And I think that really fostered my desire to be inclusive for people, to make them feel loved and included and important and valued. If you're listening to this, you are so loved.
How would you describe kind of your view of the world at that point? I mean, did you feel jaded? Were you still optimistic, cautious? How did you feel about things overall?
I think growing up, when I was a teenager, I really wanted to make an impact. I really wanted to make a difference. I, you know, would just find the people who didn't feel loved and love them, maybe because that was something that I've been called to do, but also because the reciprocation of acceptance was something that I needed as well. I was pretty introverted as a kid. So, you know, I spent a lot of time reading in trees. I wanted to be a fairy. So I read in trees, but all of the books I read were by this author called Lurleen McDaniel, she wrote about kids who had terminal cancer. And, you know, I just think that my heart has always been really squishy for people. Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
So you graduate from high school. That brings you to a point in your life where you can kind of jump off, move into another season. So what happens then? Where do you go? What do you do at that point?
So I had worked in a salon in high school as an assistant and really knew that I didn't like the culture. It was very catty and vain, and that was everything that I was trying to avoid. So, I wanted to be the first person in my family to go to college. So I went to college, started at Miami-Dade Community College, then went to FIU. And my, life at that point was like head down, work as much as I can, get through college as fast as I can with as little debt as possible. And that's all I did. I mean, again, my mom was still really strict. So even though I lived at home till I was 22, I had a curfew of 1 o'clock, which in Miami, that's kind of when the party gets started. And I wasn't allowed to drive till I was 19. So, it was really, I could go to work and I could go to school, and then I had to go home and do chores. As long as I lived in her house, those were the rules.
What were you studying?
My initial study was I did business with a minor in economics, and then I switched to drama because I really wanted to take theater makeup. So I ended up taking theater makeup, set design, and lighting, and then I actually got my degree in sociology because I was fascinated with what made people behave the way that they did. And it's interesting how God has used all of that to kind of bring me to where I am today. I use all of the skills, random skills that I have acquired along the way. So while I was in college, I worked for Sandals and Beaches Resorts. I did operations and process for them. And then I moved on to working for American Express high value customers. So I did sales for American Express.
In college still?
Mm-hmm.
You mean? Okay.
Yep. And then while I was at Sandals and Beaches, I met a man that I ended up dating for 5 years and traveling the world with. So
did you finish school first?
Yes.
Okay.
I graduated college in 3 years just because, I had nothing else to do, so I just took classes. I worked and I went to school, and I loved what I was studying. And, I've always been the employee that rised above, and it was the same in school. Like if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it great. And it has both benefited me because wherever I've worked, I have excelled, but it has kind of harmed me because, if you're the one going the extra mile, everybody who's not kind of looks bad. And so my colleagues didn't like me very much. So again, it just really kept me on this independent road. But, I was just really focused.
And did living at home still make it feel like an extension of high school? Did it feel a lot
Living
different?
at home was tough. My mom, she's amazing, but when I was growing up, she had her own challenges that she was going through. So, being at home was just always tense. And so I think my escape was working extra or taking a lot of classes so that
it gave you someplace else to be, something to do.
Mm-hmm.
You meet a guy.
I met a guy.
You met a guy, and you started traveling the world with him.
Yes. So I met this guy. I was 20, I believe, and he had just moved to Miami from upstate New York. And I was head over heels the minute I saw him, but he had just moved to Miami and wanted to kind of sow his oats in Miami. And I was like, just call me when you're ready. I will be here waiting. And so, we stayed in touch. I did his hair. He finally called me 2, 3, 4 years later, and he was ready to settle down. So we started dating.
So were you literally waiting for him? Were you dating during that time?
I was dating someone else, and I just always, kind of kept in contact with the guy I was waiting for. And I told whoever I was dating at the time, like when he calls me, I'm going. Like
like this is fun, but don't get long-term ideas about this.
So So he called, and, at that time I was single. I was living on my own, doing really well for myself at American Express. We went on a date and, talked until the moon became a sun. And, we had stayed in contact over the 3 years, so I knew him pretty well. But I was like, let's go. Come on, finally. We had no job or place to live, but we just drove to LA and he found a job with, at that time, beauty box subscriptions were just becoming a thing. And I think I started working in insurance, and I started doing hair and makeup for photo shoots and fashion shows. And because he worked for this beauty box subscription, we'd get like $500 worth of beauty products every month that I could add to my kit and go make beautiful photography that would add to my portfolio. And thus,
So how did you get connected to that world?
at that time, social media was just catching momentum. And there was a website called Model Mayhem, which was essentially photographers, models, hair and makeup artists would get on, and you could kind of search people in your area who were planning a photo shoot, and you could apply to work with them. And, I don't have a shy bone in my body. So I connected with a lot of people, got to do some really amazing creative projects. And through that process, started a company where, so we would find a mansion in the valley that was super beautiful location for photography, book. At this time, girls were just starting to understand the value of having like really hot pictures. And there were a lot of guys with cameras that wanted to take pictures of them.
I'm sure.
So we would book these models to come get their photo taken, and we would charge photographers to come take their picture and then use the money to pay the hairdressers and makeup artists. So the girls would get their pictures, the guys would get their photos, we'd make money, and everyone would have more stuff for their portfolio. It was very lucrative.
Yeah, I bet.
It was a lot of fun because some of these girls would come with like, they wanted to have like this woodland, antler costume. They would come with these crazy costumes.
So there was no promise of any of it being used for anything. It was portfolio building.
Time for print. It was 100% time for print.
Right.
So, yeah, I built a very elaborate portfolio during that time. And shortly after we were in LA, the economy crashed. This was in 2008-ish.
Yep.
And I think that the company that the guy I was with was working for wasn't doing great. And he was like, the dollar's about to plummet.
Right.
We should go make euro. And I was like, okay. So, because he was a software engineer and that was very, desired industry, he just sent his work out to some international companies he had done projects for randomly, and a company basically sponsored both of us to move to Amsterdam.
But the motivation was the value of the euro over the dollar.
The euro, absolutely. And so there were several salons in Europe because of what he did, he could work remotely. So it was really about where would I get a job. And so I just started sending my portfolio to salons overseas and got a job offer to work at this salon in Holland called Rob Paytom. And they sent me an offer letter before I ever got there. It was like salary, benefits. I mean, everyone has benefits in Holland because it's socialist, and like all I had to do was get my Dutch social security number and I could start working. So we hopped the pond and moved to Europe.
Wow. So what was the idea of beauty in Europe, Amsterdam specifically, as opposed to America and LA? I imagine they have different ideas of beauty.
Completely different. So Dutch people are incredibly practical as opposed to people from Miami. And LA.
Not practical.
Not so practical.
No.
So in America, you go to the hair salon, you bring a picture of what you want to look like. Okay, but you sit in my chair and you bring me a picture of Beyonce, and I have to remind you you're not black and this is a wig. So let's talk about your hair. So in Holland, in Amsterdam, it rains every day pretty much, and you go everywhere on a bicycle. So, you know, getting a haircut that you have to blow dry and flat iron and beat into submission is not practical because it's going to rain on your head. And, you know, however your hair dries naturally needs to be able to look good. So the salon that I worked for, Rob, he just celebrated 50 years. He had built a dynasty. At the time, he had 14 salons in Holland. Since then, he has more. He has expanded to Bali, and he's actually just opened a salon in New York. Super proud of him. But his philosophy, their catchphrase was "Haal het mooiste uit jezelf," which is Dutch for get the most beauty out of yourself. So you would look at the person's face shape, hair type, you know, color, all of that stuff, and just figure out how to make them the most beautiful version of themselves.
Right, which that seems like a logical thing to do, I guess. Not try to not pretend to be somebody else, but make the most of yourself.
Absolutely.
Right?
It was mind-blowing to me at the time. And, you know, most of my time in the hair industry up until now was kind of going to people's houses, doing their hair. I was a very undisciplined hairdresser, kind of didn't really watch my time, you know, hadn't had a whole lot of training. So they required that I go to their Academy of Hair. And so I arrived to class on the first day and realized that this was going to be in Dutch.
And that's a problem.
And I mean, so my first language growing up, my brother was really into Star Trek and had me learn Klingon, which was a very good foundation for Dutch because the dialect was so similar. So my pronunciation, Klingon
is close to Dutch.
Is beta Dutch.
That's good to know.
So in Klingon, if you were to greet someone, you would say "nu mag," which means "what do you want?"
Is that what I would say?
That's what you would say.
Okay.
And in Dutch, to say like "good morning" is "goedemorgen." So you would still have that like throaty sound. I did learn Dutch. I love languages.
How long did that take you?
I mean, obviously you pick up more as time goes on, but I think because the first exposure that I had was the vocabulary of cosmetology.
Right. You don't need that many words.
I knew what you were talking about, and a lot of the words are... So Dutch is if German and English made a baby. So hair is haar. Pretty easy.
I could follow that.
Yes. You know, highlight is foily. Well, you use foils to highlight. But then some things are really hard. So like a gloss or a toner is a spoeling. I'm like, I don't know how y'all got that, but okay. So, you know, it was just one of those things. But I was in it. I was submerged in the culture. So it was pretty quick and easy for me to learn. And most people in Amsterdam, because it's a tourist city, speak English. But I did enjoy learning Dutch. Because my classes were completely in Dutch, I also, in addition to my classes, got private one-on-one training with Rob himself, as well as the manager at the particular location salon that I worked for. So I got a lot of extra training that other people didn't get, and I was not sad about that.
So why do you think that is? Why did you get the extra training?
Because they gave me my training in English.
Oh.
Yes.
So that kind of set you apart.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So that worked to your advantage.
Being an outsider worked to my advantage.
See, there you
go.
For the first time.
Absolutely.
It worked.
For sure.
Good.
So it was excellent. And because of my experience doing fashion shows and photo shoots in LA, I was always chosen to, work on the magazine spreads or the fashion shows. I helped launch the first Amsterdam Fashion Week with Rob. I got to do some really, really fun things because I'm very comfortable being on stage and, I like having that entertaining persona. So I was lucky that I was the chosen one a lot of time.
Yeah.
I just had to, that was a time.
I'm sure that didn't make you super popular with the other girls.
Yeah,
maybe?
but I didn't speak Dutch, so I don't care.
You don't know what they were saying about you. I was
just like, whatever. I'm just, living in Holland. And honestly, I was too high to notice.
Yeah.
So, at that time, probably was, the beginning of the end of addiction for me. So, the man that I was dating at the time was obviously very heavy into pot smoking and, a bunch of other things that were just very unrighteous. And I would kind of do whatever he wanted because I was just so, beer goggles on.
Now, did you know that back in Miami?
I did. And initially I wouldn't date him because of that, but
love makes you do crazy stuff.
Love makes you do crazy things and stupid things and all of that.
All right. So now you're in Amsterdam, your career's going really well, but another element enters your life or begins to take hold more in your life in the addiction part.
So, before he would date me, I had to smoke. So, it was definitely something that I, sacrificed, compromised, and did. So, we lived in LA, and at that time, marijuana was becoming legal. Get your medical marijuana card, which obviously he did. And, it was, we were within the thresholds for sure. So while my career was amazing, home life, we had great times. I'm not going to undermine the good times that we had, but I was also, again, really lonely. I didn't have a bunch of Dutch friends. I was thousands of miles away from my family. There were a lot of times where I felt trapped in Holland, and that's not usually the side of the story that I tell, but I remember, just crying and, wondering like, how did I get here?
So on the surface, everything
in pictures
good.
It looks really good.
Yeah.
But that's what hair and makeup is for.
Right. So what do you think made you come to that realization or that feeling started to take hold of you?
I think that there was a whisper the whole time. I think even when we started dating or when we moved to New York and definitely when we were in LA, it was not always sunshine and rainbows in our relationship. But I didn't have much of a backbone. I didn't have a firm understanding that I was capable. And I was so far from my family. And because of our lifestyle, like he made a lot of money and I didn't really, because as a hairdresser, every time you move, you have to start over.
Right.
So I kind of really depended on him financially, but he would want to live really lavish, but I would have to pay half. So
which was a lot harder on you than him.
Me, exactly, because marginally I was broke.
Right.
And so there was just a lot of power that I did not have in our relationship. And the way that I'm living was not conducive to my morals. And I think that margin of not living in line with your morals, whether it's laziness, lethargy, procrastination, addiction, whatever, I think that margin is where depression happens and anxiety. And I think that is really where I lived at that time.
And how long of a period are we talking about?
So we were in Amsterdam for 2 years.
Okay.
While I was there, I went to the doctor about my depression, and it was really interesting because in America, I went to the therapist about my depression, and she prescribed me antidepressants and mood stabilizers. Well, in Europe, he asked me, what does your diet look like and how often do you exercise? And I was like, I'm skinny, so I don't exercise, and my diet looks like I eat as much sugar as I possibly can. Because I was a stoner. So,
right.
So, he kind of told me to back off the sugar and to, sport 3 times a week and get my heart rate up. Well, at that time, I had just launched a blog. And so being the nerd that I am, kind of really went down the rabbit hole of what foods influence depression. And then I went into like what foods will give you healthy skin and beautiful hair and all great content for my blog.
Right.
But really kind of found that the way that I was eating was not contributing to my mental stability. Also the way I was living, but the food was not helpful.
Right.
And so I really kind of cleaned that up. And
so what'd you do? You just came in and said, I'm throwing all the sugar away. I'm going to start eating fruits and vegetables. I mean, what kind of change
I just
did
kind of stopped eating so much stroopwafel. So they have these cookies in Holland.
Stroopwafel?
Stroopwafel.
Okay,
syrup waffles.
Oh.
They're like syrup waffle cookies. They actually have them at Home Goods.
Sounds pretty good.
They are amazing.
Sorry, I didn't mean to tempt you with the idea
No, it's
of them.
okay. I have more discipline than I did 10 years ago. So yeah, just really cleaned that up. And then I started getting really into meditation. I found a book called The Art of Happiness. It's co-written by the Dalai Lama, and learned, about controlling your thoughts and, instead of like forcing a thought out, just inviting, acknowledging, and then moving on.
Hey, everybody. Just a quick reminder that this episode is brought to you by Fiore Communications. Just like people, every business has a story to tell, and we've been helping our clients tell their story since 2001, because who you are as a company is just as important as what you do. To learn more about how telling your story can make a difference in your business, visit fiorecommunications.com. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. So Amsterdam.
So
what happens
eventually,
next?
Homeboy was a huge LeBron James fan.
Aren't we all?
No. That's going to be a hard no, Dave.
A hard no on LeBron.
Hard no on LeBron.
Okay.
So at that time in 2010, LeBron James was having the conversation of should he go from the Cavs to the Heat?
Take his talents to Miami Beach.
To Miami.
Right.
So the guy I was dating was like, if LeBron moves to Miami, it's a sign from God that we need to move to Miami. Now, meanwhile, these conversations and press conferences were happening while we were in Spain during the World Cup in 2010, when Spain went against Holland, and he was consumed by LeBron. And I'm like, dude, we're like in Spain right now.
You'd think that would capture his attention. That would be enough to capture his attention, right?
It was not. So, as you know, LeBron went to the Heat.
Right. I'm going to have to tag LeBron on this podcast now.
You're welcome.
Of this. Okay.
So LeBron went to the Heat, and we went to Miami.
Wow.
We went to
That
Miami.
was literally the reason you moved back to Miami.
Yes, it is. So my parents had moved to Crawfordville in 2006, about a year before I moved to New York, and I was not moving from Miami to Crawfordville.
That's a big change.
That was also a hard no.
Yes.
Not going to happen. So, but when we came back to the States, we both went to visit our family. I hadn't seen my parents in 3 years. And I got here, and I just kind of had this feeling like, maybe I should just stay in Crawfordville because I'm not proud of my life. And my mom was like, oh, it's just cold feet. She didn't know. She's like, I knew he was going to propose. And I was like, not really sure about it. But, kind of at that time, I didn't trust myself and my intuition and my judgment. So I kind of listened to what everybody else was saying. And I was like, well, I've been with him for 4 years and should just stay.
Right.
So we ended up getting engaged and moving back to Miami, in this glorious apartment, ocean view from every room, upgraded appliances. The only thing I cared about was I just want a washer and dryer and unit so I don't have to deal with.
So this is a place he had picked out for you?
Yeah, because we could walk to the Miami Heat arena.
Of course, to see LeBron.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was right on the Venetian Causeway, and it was a beautiful apartment, but all I wanted was washer and dryer and unit, and that was the one thing we didn't have. Totally metaphorical.
Right.
So he had been traveling, and I was, sitting on our balcony looking at the water and just asking myself over and over again, how did I get here? I am not proud of my life. I hate the way he talks to me. All we do is smoke. I feel like I have no say because I don't bring enough money to the table to have a say. I was just really kind of ashamed of where my life had ended up, and kind of decided at that moment, I need to go. So I stashed some cash, and the next time he went out of town, I rented a studio apartment on the beach and packed all my stuff and
you were
left
gone.
And slept. I mean, I could not afford anything. I didn't even have a car because we moved back to the States and we had a car. It was his car.
Sure.
So I slept on a yoga mat, and I took public transportation to a salon I was working for, and saved up enough to buy a scooter and
Scooters are
an
nice.
air mattress. And
So you were poor, but you were free.
I was poor, but I was free.
And that was good.
It was good. but I did not stop smoking. And I wish it could say that it got better. It did not. So I worked for a salon in Miami. I made so much money. It was ridiculous. I was doing really, really well for myself, really happy. But the salon that I worked for was not super happy with the philosophy that I was applying from Europe because...
The practical part?
Because it's low maintenance. And when you have low maintenance hair, you don't make as much money.
You don't have to come in as much.
Exactly. So they kind of wanted me to start doing some things that just was not how I wanted to do hair. And I wouldn't do it. And they threatened to fire me. And I still wouldn't do it. And eventually I got...
I mean, were the clients happy? Did
the
they
clients
like their
were
hair?
happy. Yeah. But you know, this is in Brickell, Miami, and
But it was too low maintenance.
It was too. I mean, these are some bougie babes in Miami. Like
the hair wasn't big enough.
I mean, yeah, there was just. I'm not going out like that. So I got fired, but not before basically stealing my entire client list and not realizing I had a non-compete, and they sued me for $10,000, and I lost. So, you know, a plethora of things happened. It was a series of unfortunate events. I got sued, lost, my car got vandalized. I had a Craigslist scam. My drug addiction went from, you know, marijuana to cocaine, and that's not cheap. Right. And I mean, really kind of philandered for 2 more years. You know, I have, you know, drug wounds and scars and traumatic memories, and it was horrible. You know, I moved to an apartment that, you know, it was infested with roaches in the hood, and it was super dangerous, and you know.
It sounds like, I mean, that's a pretty low point, right? I mean,
it was a really low point.
You've got addictions that you can't really pay for. You're living a dangerous life as far as your own personal safety.
Yeah.
I mean, how did you deal with all that?
I did
that
more
seems
drugs.
like a lot to handle.
I did so many drugs, I didn't care. I was dancing all night. I was happy.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, essentially, I didn't deal with it. You know, I started working for Home Depot doing this marketing campaign for a third-party organization that was kind of a pyramid scheme. And I did great because I had all this sales experience, and I don't have a shy bone in my body. So, you know, talk to 200 people a day to get 4 yeses. It means take 196 no's like a pro, you know, all of that stuff. Got some really great sales training, but, you know, at the next opportunity for me with that company was to go manage my own market, which would have made me financially responsible. Well, my rent checks were bouncing, and I had a rotisserie chicken and a bottle of wine in my fridge, and that's kind of how I was living my life. And I just really felt like God was telling me, like, move to Crawfordville. And I felt like he was telling me this for years, and I was like, nope.
Again, a hard no on
hard
Crawfordville.
no on that. And God just kept, you know, he'll make you suffer until you're obedient. And so I think I suffered until I called my mom one day, and I was like, come get me. And I walked outside, and there was this like Cuban refugee family, and I was like, tu necesito un cama, like, do you need a bed? Do you need anything? Like, come to my house and take it all. I'm out. And kind of that was just my MO, like, you know, move Miami to New York to LA, LA to Amsterdam, Miami, like, oh, everything's going bad, like, give away all your belongings and move.
Right.
So I gave away all my belongings and moved to Crawfordville. And that was in the end of 2013.
So that's a pretty big deal. I mean, you literally just walked away.
Yeah.
Right? And you were happy to, I mean, because you didn't sound like you had a ton
I don't know
of
that
stuff.
happy was the description I would use. I would say desperate. I would say I was...
Did you think you would not live if you stayed in Miami?
I knew I would die. Yeah, I knew that. I mean, I had almost OD'd several times and, you know, woken up in my own vomit on the beach or in someone's house. Like, I don't even know this person. Like, where's my stuff?
Was there anybody to check on you or to make sure you were okay?
I mean, the boyfriend that I was dating at that time was also heavily in cocaine and, you know, was probably a catalyst for a lot of the, you know, things that I was doing. And again, can't blame him. I released him from that. But at the same time, it just was not a healthy environment. And I just really felt like I needed to be somewhere where there was unconditional love. And, my mom and I had worked really hard through the last 10 years to overcome, challenges that we faced from my childhood and her strictness and all of that. And, it was...
So that was a place for you. Home was a place to be loved.
Yes. I mean, definitely more love than the streets of Miami.
Sure. It's kind of a low bar, but
I
yes.
mean, my mom is an angel. My mom and dad are both just... I would not be alive today if it weren't for their refuge. Came to...
And they were always like parents of the prodigal son, right? They wanted you back.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't care what you had done, where you were, what was happening.
They didn't care.
They wanted you back.
Yes.
And that must have made you, that alone makes you feel loved.
When I first got up there, I had nothing and I had everything. Mm. I had a bed. I had a full fridge. I had
real food.
Of real food.
Right.
I had a safe place to live. I had washer and dryer
in
my house. I was so grateful for laundry that I didn't need coins, and stray cats weren't on the washer. It was like great. It was, and my parents' home in Crawfordville backs up to the Apalachicola Forest, and they have this beautiful Florida room that you look at the birds, and it's such a place of tranquility and safety.
So a great change for you, Crawfordville. Definitely a move in the right direction.
It was a step in the right direction.
So did that fix everything?
No.
So what happened
Addictions
from there?
will follow you because you are the addict, not your location. So at this point, I really I've never done any hard drug since leaving Miami. I'm not doing it. But I came up here and really started drinking like an addict. I mean, I've never, it still blows my mind the way that I drank at that time. I would wake up at 2 a.m. and just start taking shots of whiskey. And for no reason. I mean, it's not like there was a party going on at my parents' house in Crawfordville at 2 a.m.
Was it a pain you were trying to kill, or was it just the
I think I was chasing the high of cocaine with alcohol.
Okay.
And, if you know anything about substances, they are not the same high, and, they won't get you to the same place. But I was just so used to that feeling. And, I was new to Tallahassee, didn't know where to buy weed. So my mom had whiskey. I'm going to drink some whiskey. And, same behaviors, waking up in my vomit, I started meeting people, going out, getting blackout drunk, driving home to Crawfordville. Mm-hmm. There were times where my parents would find me in their driveway, passed out in my car, having thrown up all over my car, and I don't even remember getting home. I mean,
how did your mom react to that?
The way any mom would react to it, it was so heartbreaking for her and my dad, and my grandma lives with my parents. And, I think back to the time and the pain that I caused them, and I'm just mortified. And, I have to forgive myself, and that is a conscious decision all the time to have to repeatedly forgive myself for the people that I hurt, when I was wrapped up in my own selfishness.
Right. So when did you reach a point, because I know we're talking now, so I know there is a happier end to all this. So where did you reach a point where that was just enough and you needed to change?
It took about 2.5 more years. So I worked at Hot Heads for 5 minutes. And in that time, with my knowledge that I had from the Home Depot campaign of put me in a group of people and I can build a clientele, I, encouraged hotheads to join the chamber, went to networking events, told everyone in the room, whoever's doing your hair can do it better, and said it to the right person, this guy whose hair was just so wrong for his face shape. And I said, please grow your hair for 6 weeks. Call me. I'll give you the best haircut you've ever had. So from that day to the time he called me, I got fired from Hot Heads because I was super arrogant and had a chip on my shoulder. And
because you had done this around the world.
I'm an international hairdresser.
So you need to listen to me.
Exactly.
I'm sure they love that.
Praise God for humility. So that guy called me and, for his haircut. And I was like, well, at that point, I felt a strong calling that God said, just be still, like stop. You are going 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction, and then you get knocked down and you get up and you go 100 miles an hour in a different run. Like, just stop.
Right.
So I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to job hunt. I'm not going to work in a salon. Like, I'm just going to be still. And so this guy calls me for his haircut, and I was like, yeah, God told me to be still. I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing. And he's like, so I actually was calling you for a different reason. I have this idea for a company, and I think you would be great at sales. So the idea of the company was Socially Loved.
Right.
And met with him.
So he got that from your interaction in the hair salon?
He got that from watching me go to everyone in the room saying, whoever's doing your hair, I can do it better. And just like booking. I mean, I booked so many.
He saw the hustle.
He saw the hustle.
Right. Okay.
I mean, I got to hustle. So, you know, when you move over and over as a hairdresser, you got to hustle.
Right.
So
this is Eric.
This is Eric.
Okay.
So he told me this idea of a company that would love others and remind small business owners that they are loved by using their word of mouth. And, you know, just my heart over the years, all about wanting to love people. I was like, okay, this sounds great. I've never built a company from the ground up, but we did. And it was great because when Socially Loved started, we were capitalized when we started. And so through development of the company, I got paid.
Right. So what was his background, and what was he looking for from you?
So Eric had another publication called Locals Love Us that he had done in 7 other cities across the state. He had franchised. It was very successful. And the way that it worked was it was a voting platform where people would vote for their favorite businesses, and the businesses would be allowed to advertise in the magazine. The challenge is 1, the same people would win over and over again, and 2, people didn't really trust it because it was like the loudest person was who got all the votes, not necessarily the best or most honorable person.
The one who would rally the most votes for them.
Exactly. So it just wasn't trustworthy. And he actually moved to Tallahassee to bring it to its 8th city and felt like God was telling him to stop and do something else. And so this something else was Socially Loved. The initial concept of it was, you know, giving away gift cards to reward people for speaking kindly about businesses. So we were capitalized when we got started, went through, I don't even know how many rough drafts before we finally put out a first book. And, you know, over the course of the years, just learned a lot. And
you liked this, right?
I loved the mission. I loved the mission. Initially, when he told me about the idea, I thought I was going to be doing hair and makeup for photo shoots that would go in a book. That is not what I did.
Right.
But if you're in the book and you need your hair and makeup done for the photo shoot,
that's right.
Call me.
You're there, right?
But yeah, so I ended up through the 4 or 5 years that, you know, I worked with the company, I did 100%, 99% of the sales for the company.
And the concept is it's basically social media posts in print, right?
Exactly. Yep.
So it's saying good things, sharing the brand, the feeling, the culture.
It's word of mouth in a book.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And how was that received at first?
I think at first people had no idea what we were talking about because traditionally advertising is your logo, your photo, a website, you know, a call to action. So we used to like draw these stick figure pictures before the first book ever come out, and people were like, I don't get it at all. And so we basically gave away our first book for free and just found businesses, put them in it so that we could have
proof of concept. That's not that unusual, really, to do that.
Yep. So once people saw it, they loved it. I mean, it's a beautiful publication, excellent quality. The client would receive a lot of value out of it. You know, they'd get these beautiful photos that they could use for their website, social media, you know, brand pamphlets, print, whatever. You get rights to the photography, which that in of itself paid for itself. And then we would put these books all over the city, you know, direct mail to homes and in doctor's offices. So they would get a lot of pickup, a lot of shelf life and longevity. And so basically year 1, we changed our concept so many times that I felt when we finally nailed down what we were going to do, we needed to have a party. What I really wanted was to throw a massive Gatsby party at the Capitol. It sounded like a good idea at the time.
I actually remember that.
Also not a sober thought.
Right. Right.
So I was like, it'll just take me a day to plan. Have you ever planned a party? That does not take a day. So this Gatsby party took all of my effort
huge.
From October to January to plan. So I was putting all of my effort into this and not selling. So the company was losing a lot of money. They were, obviously super frustrated with me, but I really wanted to have this
Did
party.
Eric want the party or was...
Nobody wanted the party.
Just you.
I wanted the party.
Okay.
And I'm a really hard person to say no to. So I got my party. And the next day, I think the weight of, the party was very well attended. We planned for 200, 400 showed. And it was not the demographic I was hoping for. I wanted it to be our clients. And basically everyone in Tallahassee who wanted a Gatsby party and an open bar came. Mm-hmm. And
so it wasn't really business development.
It was such a waste of time.
Yeah.
And so I think the weight of that just kind of collapsed on me the day after the party. And so to deal with it, I did what I know how to do, which was to drink and smoke. And I drank 2 bottles of wine by myself. At this time, I was about 105 pounds. So drank 2 bottles.
This is when you got home from the party.
This was the next day.
Okay.
Came home, drank this wine, left my house to go looking for drugs, and got lost. I didn't know where I was. So I lived in Midtown and apparently ended up somewhere on Tharp and Old Bainbridge at 2 a.m, blackout drunk. Had to send my husband a pin to come find me and pick me up because I couldn't figure out how to get home.
Right.
And the next day...
You were in a car.
I was in my car. Okay. I was driving.
Right.
The next day, went to drink some more and realized, I must have drank it all the night before. I should go get more. And at this point, I said, living in a way that's not conducive to your morals is where depression lives, in my opinion. At this point, I was suicidal. And so I called Eric and I was like, I just need a day to kind of figure things out. And he didn't know that I was struggling with anything. I think a lot of my sales meetings weren't going great because I was high in them and was rambling and, It was just not good. And so when I called him and told him this, he said, take all the time you need. And when I hung up, I felt like God said, you will take all the time you need to get sober. And I was like, I'm going to drink and read the Bible.
Sounds like a half solid plan.
Yeah. I was all about that Joshua. So, that's what I did. I drank and I read the Bible and, did not get sober, and it took about 2.5 weeks of me just living in my addiction. And I called Eric and was like, I just need one more day. And I texted him and I turned my phone off because I didn't want to see his response. And when I turned my phone off, I felt like God said, you're going to lose it all. And the next morning, I turned my phone back on and Eric had texted me, you should come to the morning meeting. So I smoked. Right. And then I went to the morning meeting.
Right.
And he basically said that he was going to sell the company because the market didn't trust us. And I was like, I know why the market doesn't trust us. And Socially Loved, after everything I had been through, was everything to me. I mean, I met my husband because of Socially Loved. I met everyone I knew. I was identifying myself as this hug dealer, and I couldn't lose this lifeline. What this company was going to become was my ticket to success, and I couldn't lose it. So I was like, I have to get sober. And so I went to an AA meeting. I had been when I first moved here, and listened to everybody. And I'm like, I don't have a problem with drinking. I have a problem with drugs. Right. I'm not like you people.
Right.
But I went to an AA meeting and, listened and cried the whole time and, picked up a white chip of surrender and drank the next day. Got completely wasted. And that was when it was like, you can't even go a day. Clearly, there's a problem. In AA, we talk about if you're not sure that you're an alcoholic or an addict, try some controlled drinking and see how that goes.
Right.
I got drunk. That's how that went.
Yeah.
So the next day, I went back, picked up another white chip, and that's my sobriety birthday. It was February 16th, February 19th, 2016. So it was Socially Loved. In January of 2016.
Wait, so that was it?
That was it.
No drinking since then?
I've been totally sober, no drinking, no drugs.
Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So in January of 2016, our revenue was like $17,000. In February was $16,000. In March was $39,000. And the following January, I bought the company. I invested in it with Richard,
Okay.
my partner. So sales were going great. We were getting momentum. People were trusting us.
So wait, I'm sorry, I just want to back up. So Eric got out.
Eric
and
sold
to
half
Rich-
the company to me and Richard.
Okay.
But we had majority.
Okay.
So it was...
So Eric moved on, but Socially Loved continued
Exactly.
with you and Richard.
Exactly.
And now things are looking better.
Things are good.
Okay.
So in 2017, things were going great. We had profit. We were taking distributions. We were getting momentum. We were looking at opening other markets. Like... Everything was amazing.
And you're doing well through this?
I was doing great, happy. In AA, we talk about the pink cloud. Like, everything's amazing. It was so good. And I think over time of doing the right things, whether it's sobriety or just staying really disciplined and focused on your goals, over time, you get momentum. And then you kind of start to see how consistency pays off. And you get really excited because you have hope. Your consistency is actually moving the needle and you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm doing it. I'm doing the thing. Like,
right.
This is it. So, I have been working on getting sober and doing the thing since I left my ex-fiance, 9 years earlier. So like, yay, finally. So things are going good. But I had to work so hard for us to make budget because we had all of this startup debt from all of those different ideas that we had and paid for. We were no longer capitalized. And, there was a lot of pressure for me. And, I'm the kind of person that I can go 100 miles an hour for about 15 minutes and then I need a break. And I go 100.
Right.
So, that's not good for business revenue if that's your sole producer. Like it's okay if someone does it, but then somebody needs to come and pick up the slack. There wasn't anyone to pick up the slack for me. And over time, I just kind of realized, like, what's going to happen if I want to have a baby? Or what's going to happen if I want to take a vacation? Or, it's always going to be like this.
Right.
Like
it never goes away.
As long as I'm the sole producer, it's always going to be on my shoulders.
So Richard wasn't involved on the sales end.
Richard did creative. And he's amazing at it. He's so good. He's amazing at photography. He built our entire distribution process. He kind of really did everything else. And I did sales. He managed our social media, the blog, the creative, the putting the book together. I mean, honestly, the company was really built on Richard. I just made the sales. Okay. So, obviously sales are super important, but I couldn't sell the books if the books weren't beautiful and everywhere. So it was really a joint effort.
Sounds like you complemented each other well.
On paper.
Right.
In real life, we did not. We didn't. I mean, we just are very, very similar to a fault. And I think that was really hard on us, and it was really hard on our team. It was really hard on Eric. And eventually, like, Eric moved away to Colorado, and we were just kind of like, all right, well, it's up to us, and we can't agree on anything. So,
right.
We just kind of like, as long as we stayed in our own lanes and did our job, everything was great. But the minute we had to like sit down and solve a problem, it was a nightmare.
But eventually you decided to move on yourself.
I just didn't want to sell advertising anymore. I missed doing hair, and I really wanted something that would allow me to start a family. And so I stepped down and sold my shares to Richard and picked up my scissors and started doing hair again. And so I took a brief tour of helping Vail Food Co. build their catering division. I love building business. I have some experience in it. I knew a lot of small business owners who need to cater, and I like to build process. And so I really just stepped over to Vail for a little while to help create those processes with Sonny. He was a client of ours at Socially Loved. Love him to pieces. We're very like-minded with, the tenacity that we attack our goals.
Right.
So glad I got to mentor under Sonny for a short time. He really taught me that my threshold for stress needed to grow because I'm very emotional. And, I have learned you work in food service, you learn how to deal with stress, let me tell you.
Sure, yeah.
And I think it was just like one more lesson that I needed to get before I really stepped on my own as a sole owner of my very own business.
So it was a good transition period.
It was excellent. I got a lot of free food.
Good food, healthy food.
Healthy food, which was great because I did a fitness competition through the process, which, made it really easy for prepping.
Right.
I was definitely fueled by Vail, and I won 5th place. So it's just
Well, I did want to get into that, so we'll jump over to that real quickly. Yeah. So in the middle of all this, you decided that you wanted to be a bikini fitness competitor.
So I wanted to do bikini competition since I moved to Tallahassee.
You did.
But it's not very complimentary to the active addiction lifestyle. And then once I got sober, my focus really needed to be on building.
So it's hard for your body to look good if you're not healthy. Is that?
Yeah.
Is that? Yeah. That seems logical.
It requires a lot of discipline, which addicts don't typically have.
Right.
And then also my focus was really on building Socially Loved. And so, working with Vail, I just had the flexibility and support that I needed to go after this goal.
I mean, that sounds like kind of an all-in kind of thing, right?
100%. Yeah, there is you're not going to do well if you don't fully commit to doing a show. I met my coach through Instagram. She's amazing. I still work with her today. We actually have about a year. October 6th will be a year from us working together.
So are you still doing that in any capacity now?
I'm not training for a show. I'm training for life.
Okay.
It's a lifestyle.
So the workouts, the training, the diet, it's for you, not to be on stage. It's just for your own
I
health
will definitely compete again one day after a baby.
Right.
So that's the goal.
Sounds like a good goal.
We're working on it.
Okay.
It's fun to work on that goal.
All right. So you leave Vail and then you get back into the
So
beauty
I actually
industry.
started doing hair again while I was still at Vail.
Okay.
I had enough clients that I didn't really want to do them in my bathroom anymore.
Yeah.
And so I had started renting a room at a salon just on Saturdays. The owner didn't work there on Saturdays, so I rented her space for like $50 a day. And eventually my Saturdays were booked. And I knew I didn't want to stay in food service. I knew that was not my forever home. And Sonny knew it too. But I didn't really know what was next for me. And one of the rooms at the salon had become available for full time, and I kind of looked at it and I'm like, maybe I could do this. And so I sat down and found out the price to rent that room, and I was like, maybe I can do it. But she was amazing and just really worked with me. She let me take her room, which was smaller and more affordable. It was still a big commitment. And I remember signing the lease and having 2 thoughts. Thought number 1 was, God, this is your ministry. I will not be doing hair for the sake of vanity, but I wanted to take the ministry aspect that I loved and missed from Socially Loved and applied it to doing hair. The other thing I told myself, and I still tell myself this today when I have a fear of failing, like when too many people cancel or I start getting nervous, is I sold print advertising in the digital age in a city where I knew no one and sold $500,000 a year. So pretty sure I
can. How hard could this be?
I mean, my break even is really
and plus,
easy.
You're an international hairdresser.
I am an international hairdresser, and I'm really freaking good at my job.
That helps.
It helps. I know exactly what I'm doing.
Right. And so that's thriving, growing.
It's going great. I have taken everything that I've learned about having amazing social media. I actually relaunched my beauty blog that I had when I was overseas.
Which is what?
It's tallybeautygirl.com.
Okay.
I have wanted to relaunch this blog since leaving my ex-fiance. But my blog that I had back in the day was purchased under his GoDaddy.
Of course.
And he would not release it to me.
Really?
So I bought it in 2008, the domain, for $2.99. And by the time he released it, because of the traffic and exposure I had built up to the website, GoDaddy wanted to sell it back to me for $13,000. I was like, I'll just rebuild it.
Wow.
So we're
crazy
working on it. I have better content now. I've partnered with Charlene Tricky from Tricky Photos. She's an amazing photographer. She was a client of ours at Socially Loved. And when I called her and told her about my idea, she was like, I want to be part of whatever you're doing. And I'm like, great, because I want your photos. They are beautiful. They're bright, white, airy. She's a Christian, which is really important to me. And she just really has a heart for serving her clients. So she does all of my photography. And it's just going amazing. I've taken a whole bunch of education. I've done classes with the Business of Balayage, which is a national balayage company.
What is balayage?
So balayage means to hand paint the hair. It's just a more natural look, but you can really mess it up if you don't do it right.
You mean as opposed to highlighting or
exactly.
coloring all the hair?
Exactly.
I'm not a hair person, really.
You're doing really good.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm actually super proud of you.
Thank you.
So yeah, I'm balayage certified. I got my certification, and I've taken a whole bunch of classes since then. My specialty has always been cutting. I'm a ninja. So I really love that now, today, I'm like, my color is on point. Like, I know exactly what I'm formulating. I've written some blogs about how hair color is the same as algebra. And
well, I wasn't good at algebra, so.
I loved math, and then I stopped practicing and then hated it. And now, color is algebra and cutting is geometry. And so it's really
I get that part.
Very scientific and mathematical, but there's a creative aspect to it as well.
That sounds great. Well, I'm happy that's going well.
I love it.
That's awesome. All right, we're going to be in trouble if we don't talk about your husband, or you're going to be in trouble if we don't talk about your husband.
Yeah, I did spend a good amount of time talking about the ex.
Yeah, so we need to balance that out just a teeny bit. So
okay.
Tell me about your husband.
My husband's amazing. He is the total opposite of me. So I am a Puerto Rican Leo from Miami, and he is a introvert from Wisconsin.
His name is Louis.
His name's Louis. So I swore after my debacle with LeBron that I would never marry a man who was into sports. So God sent me the strength and conditioning coach for the Florida State Seminoles, and that's who I married.
That's the sense of humor part.
God is funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Louis is a strength and conditioning coach at FSU.
He worked under Jimbo.
Okay.
And so obviously when Jimbo had his rough year and the administration left, my husband had to find a new career path. So over the last few years, he's really been exploring different industries and learning a lot. And like I've learned with going through a million different industries, is it's all a tapestry that God is creating to use these different skills that you're going to acquire along the way to make you better. And so he's really just been flourishing. He sells insurance now for Tom Patterson at Allstate. So if you need a home auto quote,
here comes the plug.
Call Louis at Allstate and he'll hook you up.
Nice.
He loves to take care of and protect people, and he really likes strategy. So I think he's really enjoying the insurance aspect. I am so blessed that God gave me Louis. He is stable and consistent, and if it were not for him, I don't think I would have gotten sober. He really knows how to hold me accountable and make me feel loved and empowered at the same exact time.
That's awesome.
He stopped drinking when I stopped drinking. He didn't really have a problem with it, but, he has seen couples where one tries to get sober and the other one doesn't, they drink, and then it's just kind of enables them to relapse. And so he just did not want that to be our relationship. He has taught me so much about healthy living through fitness, eating right. He's a coach. And so he's been my coach, and he's my best friend, and he's really hot.
Okay.
So I really like him.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad the hotness, that adds another layer.
He's gorgeous. I'm lucky.
That's
Don't
good.
touch him.
So I do have one final question for you, and that is, Of course, the podcast name is How I Got Here, so that's where we are right now. So I just want to know, where do you think here might be in 3 to 5 years from now?
Well, I am at Beauty and Grace Hair Salon now, and we have had a lot of conversation about things we want to do in the community. We want to have like Mom's Night Out. I would love to start a Bible study called Beauty in the Bible. I would love to just pour into the Tallahassee community and make it better, not only like aesthetically, but you know, I really have a heart for Tallahassee. Hopefully there's a baby in the future and more fitness competitions.
After the baby.
Lots of gains. I don't know. I have learned, so my sponsor from AA is working on something with me right now, and she's going to be so proud of me. So, you know, it's really easy to dwell on the past and look back, or look forward and think like what's going to happen. But she says, look down. Where are your feet? That's where your mind should be. And so hopefully this podcast airs.
It should.
Yeah. And, you know, that's where I am today. I'm just loving on Tally and letting women see how beautiful they already are, and loving my husband and loving myself.
That was Kristine Dobosenski. And whether you interact with her in the salon, in the gym, or hanging out in a coffee shop speaking Klingon, your meeting is sure to start with a hug, and that can't be a bad thing. Thanks for listening to the show. You can subscribe at Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, please leave us a review. It really does make a difference. Thanks to my amazing staff at Fiore Communications, who pick up the slack while I'm working on these podcasts, and to Troy Bloom for composing our theme music. You can hear more of Troy's creations on Facebook and Instagram at Troy Bloom Music. To connect with the podcast or suggest a future guest, follow us on social media or email us at podcast@fiorecommunications.com.